Hi, my name is Pastor Hal York, and welcome to Truth in the Trenches. Today we're going to be in James chapter 3, verse 2. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. The New Living Translation says, Indeed, we all make many mistakes. For if we could control our tongues, we would be perfect, and could also control ourselves in every other way. Well, there's probably no other chapter in the New Testament that is more convicting than James chapter 3. We started looking at this last time. It's convicting because it talks about the tongue. And it's hard to read because everything it says is true. And unfortunately, everything it says about the tongue is true of me, and it's true of you. That instrument, the tongue, gets us into more trouble in our lives on a regular basis than anything else. The reason being, the tongue is probably exercised more than any other thing in our lives. Our hearts beat automatically, we breathe automatically, that's how God made us. But the tongue is not one of those things. I speak because I have something to say. My tongue doesn't speak on its own. It doesn't have a life of its own. It doesn't operate from any other principle other than the fact that I make it wag. I make it work. If I decide not to say something, my tongue can't say, listen, I want to say something. No, it doesn't work like that. My tongue doesn't speak on its own, and I can't make it stop. No, my tongue speaks because I want it to, and I can make it stop. It reveals what's going on in my heart, in your heart, and it's an accurate reading. I may not like the reading. I may not like what it implies, but it's true. That's why it's hard to read James 3 and not be tempted to do what he warns us about in chapter 1. Prove yourselves doers of the word and not merely hearers who delude themselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks in his natural face in a mirror. For once he's looked at himself and gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of person he was. Boy, is that not true when it comes to what we read in chapter 3 about our tongues. James is being realistic. Verse 2, he says, For we all stumble in many ways. He doesn't say this to make us feel better, that we're all like this, so let's not be too hard on each other. No, he says it because what he tells us, what he's about to tell us in the following verses is true of all of us, and therefore important for all of us. The problem with the tongue boils down to control, and what he's emphasizing in this section in chapter James 3 is the importance of controlling our tongue. As we know, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And simply what that means is what controls our heart controls our tongue. That's why Proverbs says to guard our heart with all diligence, for out of it come the issues of life. What controls our heart controls our tongue. If anger is controlling our heart, it's going to control our tongue. If vengeance or envy is controlling our hearts, then it's going to control our tongue. If love and compassion and patience and impatience is controlling our tongue, it's going to be evident. Our heart is going to be evident in our tongue. So whether we want to admit it or not, I and I alone am in control of my tongue. You and you alone are in control of your tongue. What crosses my lips, I decide, no one else. If I hit my thumb with a hammer putting a nail in, what I choose to say, what I choose not to say, is up to me. I'm responsible for both. And I'm going to be held accountable for both one day. All of us are. That's true about anything that we say or we don't say. And controlling the tongue is not just about not saying certain things. It's speaking up when we should speak up as well. So verse 2, controlled speech is a measure of maturity. The word stumble here means to fall or to trip. And we all stumble, we all fall, and we all trip at times. I'm sure we've all done it. But not all falls are created equal, are they? And some of us may have the scars or bruises to prove it. For example, falling off a chair is not the same as falling down the stairs. When we stumble with our tongue, it may seem harmless. We say things like, I was only joking or teasing. But it can leave deep wounds that last a long time. The reason it seems harmless to us and we try to make little of it is because it didn't hurt us. When we stub our toe and trip, it hurts us. But when we stumble with our tongue, it hurts others. There was a young girl, 13 years old, found floating in a river. She'd committed suicide. And there was a note they found in one of her pockets, and on it was written 2 words. They said. They said. Do we realize what a word from our tongue can do? It can wreck a local church, mar a child for life, disrupt the harmony of a business office, and destroy a marriage. Words are like arrows. Once you shoot them, you can't get them back. A child's disobedience, a spouse's actions, I can't blame them for my strong, hurtful words, harsh words. They came from my heart, and I can't blame them on my children's disobedience. I can't blame them on anyone else. I take responsibility, and you need to take responsibility for words that come out of your mouth and my mouth. James will illustrate this later on in chapter 3. James says, if we do not stumble with our tongue, we are perfect. Perfect means complete or mature. And we are never truly said to be growing in spiritual maturity until we no longer trip people up with our words, thereby proving that we are able to bring the entire body under control. It reminds us how central the tongue is in our sanctification. Proverbs reminds us that how we use our tongue is often the major difference between being wise or foolish. The great battle in all of our lives when it comes to spiritual maturity or Christ-likeness is our tongue. It's not the only battle we have in our spiritual journey, but the reality for all of us is that the battle for the control of the tongue is on the front lines. Yes, there are skirmishes that break out in other areas, but where the battle rages the fiercest and most relenting is with how we use our tongue. That's why Proverbs says, as I said earlier, guard your heart. To guard your heart, to guard my heart, is to guard our tongue. Controlling the tongue doesn't just happen. We don't just wake up one morning or go home from church or a conference or a counseling session and suddenly we have control of our tongue. Controlling our tongue comes from self-discipline, guarding our heart from envy, anger, worry, hate, bitterness, what we read, what we watch, what we listen to, filling our hearts and minds with the Word of God, asking the Spirit of God to fill us daily, to control us. And James's point in verse 2 is if we can master the tongue, we have the capacity to master the rest of our body. But it's the last frontier, isn't it, in self-control. You can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go jogging. You can discipline your body to do all kinds of things, to go on a diet, to lose weight, to stop a habit. And people have done amazing things in the realm of self-discipline. But the final frontier, the hardest thing to control, is the tongue. And when we have control of the tongue, controlling the rest of the body, it means we can control the rest of the body because we've done the hardest thing to control the tongue. Now, we'll never truly master the tongue or control it until we see Jesus face to face. But we need to pursue it for the sake of our marriage, our friendships, the people in our church, our friends, our children, our enemies. It's not a once-for-all battle. It's a daily battle. The rest of chapter 3 drives these points home. But we need to be controlled. We need to control our tongues. We need to make it a priority to think about what crosses our lips, what doesn't cross our lips. Psalm 19 says, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock, or my rock and my Redeemer. And that needs to be our prayer every day. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart, you notice how those are connected? What we meditate on is what we're going to talk about. What we meditate on, what we're thinking about is what's going to come across. It's going to dictate how it comes across and how it touches other people's lives. Words are like arrows. Once you shoot them, you can't get them back. So we need to be careful how we use our tongue. Controlling it needs to be the number one priority in our life if we're going to have healthy marriages and relationships in every area of life. So may this truth guide us and guard us in the trenches of life as we seek to live our lives for the glory of God and the good of others. May God bless.